Hi friends, today we have a wonderful story, Marriage for Revenge. Share your opinion on this story in the comments. Enjoy watching! On the very night of the terrible downpour, she got married for the second time. The priest asked Lucas by Turfin if he would take Briella Ford as his wife and love her for the rest of his life. Then made the same request to Briella and asked if she would swear to take Lucas by Turfin to be her husband and love him for the rest of her life. They gave their consents. Briella informed him that she would swear on her life, but only for revenge. A dinner party at the Imperial Palace 5 months ago. The doctor announced that Empress Olivia Roan was pregnant. She asked again. To which the doctor reiterated that she was having a child. Gusto, the emperor of the state of Roan, asked about why at the dinner party, since there had been no news for 4 years in a row, and the empress was also proving to be difficult. Who knew that she would take advantage of the one-night mistake. Then he added that although it was possible that she was not carrying his child under her heart, Olivia turned to her husband and informed him that he was overstepping his bounds. The emperor didn't understand who else was crossing her, because they say that women don't forget their first men. He turned to Lucas by Turfin and asked if that was not the case, to which he simply remained silent. Gusto thought about how much they pissed him off. He got up and said that he had to go, because the news was too shocking to even lose his appetite. Already on his way out, he turned around and wished her a pleasant evening with her ex-fiancé. Olivia wondered if it was her fault again. Lucas by Turfin, a prince 16 years ago who lost his right to the throne in a coup d'état. He had lost everything the new emperor had left him, that pathetic title of duke, more like a dog collar. Even as a child, she was destined to become empress, so they were engaged to Prince Lucas back then. But for the sake of her family's well-being after the coup, she had to turn her back on him. The empress ran away and ended up becoming the wife of Gusto, the new emperor's son. They couldn't fall in love. That terrible night spent together was only once, when Gusto quarreled with his mistress. Even though no one can congratulate Olivia on such an event, it is her child. But that was okay. It was enough for her that she had one person on her side who was a great hope for her. Olivia folded her hands and asked the goddess to bless that child. 5 months later, on the streets of the kingdom, everyone was talking about the empress' pregnancy. It was joyful news for people. 2 men came to Olivia's office. One turned to her and told her that it seemed necessary to redistribute the internal budget. Olivia asked if there had been a mistake. There had been exactly that. The empress sat down at the table and asked about the fact that hadn't it already been distributed a year in advance and where the problem had arisen. The elder replied that the budget of the Pink Palace had already been exhausted, and therefore the budget of the other palaces had to be reallocated. Olivia asked about what the man said. The Pink Palace was the palace where the favorite concubine of the current emperor lived. That girl was called the most beautiful flower of the empire. She had an arrogant and eccentric character. With each passing day, Gusto's feelings for her grew deeper and deeper, and she turned up her nose. It was natural and obvious that she would someday take Olivia's see away from her. The empress informed her that if she hoped to get the budget of her palace, she had better put such thoughts out of her head. As they know, there is a baby on the way, and so Olivia's palace is also short on budget. Olivia said that she will not change her mind and ordered to leave her alone. The ministers should gather and prepare everything for the birth of the child, but none of the nobles or even the emperor himself showed the slightest interest in her pregnancy. The empress turned to the maid and asked why she was not leaving, as she wanted to be alone. The maid replied that she could not leave the empress when she was in her position. Gusto has handed over all state affairs to her, but he hasn't shown up once in 5 months. I'm sure he just wants to see what happens to her. The servant handed her a letter and told her it came from the emperor. Olivia read it and said that the emperor wrote that he would come for tea, so she should prepare tea and sweets after dinner. After the emperor's arrival, Olivia asked him why he had come to such a faraway place. Gusto asked about why he should summon his pregnant wife. After all, it would be better to come himself, because such a thing would look better in the eyes of the public. Softly bedded, yes, hard to sleep. Every time Gusto came to the palace, different unpleasant things happened to Olivia. Even that day she couldn't help but feel nervous too. Her husband held out a beautifully wrapped box to her. Olivia asked about what it was, to which he replied that if she was interested, she should open it. The box contained children's shoes. Gusto said that he had prepared the baby's first shoes because that was a father's job. Olivia asked if he'd made them himself. Gusto replied that yes, he thought he could do it quickly, but it was more difficult and showed his toes, which were covered with plasters. Olivia couldn't believe it. Her husband apologized for everything because the news of the baby's birth was so sudden, and so he didn't know how to behave. He put his hand on hers and told her that if she didn't mind, he would like to be a good father. Olivia trembled a little at the words, for she had not expected to hear them. She thanked him. The emperor said that he did not want to hear her thank him, but the baby. Gusto hadn't been a good husband to Olivia, but who knew, maybe he would treat the baby differently. Olivia informed him that the baby must have liked his gift. The emperor asked how the baby knew, since he was in her belly. The empress explained that although he was in the belly, he could hear everything. That's why they say that babies recognize the voices of their parents after birth. Gusto suspected the rumor and asked to pour more tea. He asked about the fact that she seemed to know everything about babies. Olivia replied that she was going to be a mother for the first time, so she was getting ready for it, and she took a cup of tea and drank it. Gusto said that he should come more often to see the baby then, and then asked if he could touch her belly, to which the empress replied that he could. She explained that she thought that the baby was also happy to see his father. Gusto said he was strong. As the maid said, he too needed time to realize he was a father. Perhaps their baby could receive real parental love. Suddenly she was bleeding. She didn't realize what was happening. Olivia started coughing violently. Gusto reported that he didn't think it would turn out to be so easy. He grinned and asked her if the baby was still happy. Olivia didn't realize what was happening. She can't breathe. She can feel the life inside her slowly fading away. Gusto asked about knowing what a scandal Eve had made when she'd found out about her pregnancy, because from the beginning, the problem had been that that baby had appeared in her belly. Olivia mentally apologized to the baby for not being able to keep it. She would go right after him. After a while, she woke up. Olivia didn't realize what was wrong or where she was. She remembers exactly how she drank the poison tea and started coughing up blood. Olivia then died with the baby. Olivia threw up because she thought she was going to throw up. She ran past the mirror, but it was her own reflection that made her stop. She looked at herself and could not understand who she was and what was going on. She ran out into the street, wondering what the place was like, because she had never been there before. She looked around and saw a beggar and decided to go to it. On the way, she fell into puddles with her bare feet. She was very cold. She could clearly feel the cold with her whole body, which meant that she was not dead. But the baby, who was her only hope, was no longer with her. She was determined that she would avenge Gusto for her tryst and stick a knife in his vile heart, and he would pay for the child's death. For the sake of her revenge, she must find out what had happened to her. She approached the men and asked if Ron was there or not and how she could get to the imperial palace. Those men only looked at each other and started smiling strangely. They stood up, embraced her, and told her that they would guide her to the imperial palace. But first, she had to divorce herself from them a little. She asked them to let them go and asked how he dared to behave so indecently around her. One of those men asked if she was an honorable lady or what, because what did they care what kind of crazy woman was in there? Olivia thought to herself that surely there must be a reason why she had stayed alive. She must not let them attack her. The girl decided to take action and screamed for those to let her go and bit one by the arm. That's how she was able to break free and run. The men immediately started shouting that the girl was running away and should be caught quickly. At that moment, Olivia was just thinking that she needed to get out of the alley, because if she was on the big road, someone would probably help her. She could almost see the exit. She just needed to get there quickly. But only one had managed to catch her after all. Olivia didn't understand how to be and what to do, but suddenly she heard the sound of a carriage. The man had loosened his grip a little and turned to his friends to tell them that he had caught her. But just then Olivia thought about the carriage coming. It was traveling down the big road ahead. That's when she decided to break free, because he was no longer holding her so tightly, and continued to run faster. It was a risk for her, but also the only way to escape from those men. She managed to run out onto the big road after all. As it turned out, up ahead, a carriage was coming towards her. The coachman immediately shouted to her. In her previous life, she had been unable to protect her child or herself, but this time was different. In this life, she would do anything, all to avenge her baby and herself. Olivia ran right up to meet the horses. The Duke, who was riding in the carriage, did not understand what had happened because they stopped abruptly. The coachman said that there was an accident because some girlfriend jumped out on the road, and that man, who ran after her, stayed behind the corner of the building and watched. They realized at once that it was the carriage of an aristocrat and it was better not to mess with him, so they decided to leave. The Duke asked about the girl. The coachman replied that she had fainted, for it looked as if someone was chasing her. He got up from the carriage and asked the coachman to put her in the carriage and take her home. The next morning, the girl did wake up. The doctor noticed that she was up and asked about her waking up. She asked what had happened. And across from her was Varen, whom she knew in a previous life. The doctor explained that she had been hit by a carriage and luckily there were no serious injuries and asked what was wrong with her. Varen, the son of the former emperor's physician, she heard that after the coup he disappeared to follow Lucas. Now the girl realized that he was alive, and then the thought came to her that she was in Lucas's estate. She thought about what it meant that the carriage that had hit her was Lucas' carriage. No, she needed to calm down. This is a goddess-sent chance for her. It's a chance to pay back the day that came years ago, and also to avenge the death of her child, who died at the hands of his father. Varen informed her that her condition was dire. She should drink medicine after eating. She asked her to tell the Lord. Varen did not understand what she meant. She asked him to tell his master that the golden rose had come to meet the black wolf, a memory from his childhood. Little Lucas talked about how he wanted the people of the state to live in peace and harmony like his father wanted, except he questioned if he was reasoning correctly. Lucas always knew it sounded too utopian, but at that moment, more and more people are following not his father's lead, but Gusto's father's. He feels like there's pitch blackness ahead of him. To which Olivia replied that in that case she would be by his side to light the way. She would become a bright golden rose and walk towards him, towards the brave black wolf who would guide him. That was the pact for them. Already in the study, Lucas asked about the truth of what she had said, to which Varen replied that yes, she had said that the golden rose was going towards the black wolf, just like that. Lucas only smiled, for it was a promise they had made to each other as children. It was a secret cipher between him and Olivia, as well as a secret to others. However, he couldn't understand how it could be known by the girl his carriage ran into on the poor man's street. Lucas kept thinking that it was possible that it wasn't just an accident, that she could have planned it to get close to him, so he would have to check it out for himself. Lucas left the office and headed towards the girl to see who the girl calling herself a golden rose was. At the time, Olivia was thinking about the fact that in order to get revenge on Gusto, she needs someone who can infiltrate the imperial palace. She needs status so she can be around Lucas. Suddenly, he walked sharply into the room and asked her about who she was. Olivia at that moment became very scared to go out with him. But here, if she stopped, she wouldn't be able to start anything. Olivia abruptly turned around and said that Her Majesty the Empress was dead because she had fallen into the Emperor's trap. Lucas immediately grabbed her by the throat and began pressing her with words about being pregnant and then asked how he could trust some stranger. Lucas ordered her to tell him who had sent her. At that moment, Olivia couldn't even breathe. All she said was that she was Miss Olivia's shadow and that she had been given an order, which was why she had come to him to carry it out. The girl asked him to listen. Lucas asked about her coming on Olivia's orders, to which she replied that she had. If she said she was Olivia, he wouldn't believe it anyway. But even as it is, with absolutely nothing, she absolutely needs to get a place next to Lucas. She informed him that she would help him get his crown back, but he had to marry her. Lucas asked if the crown of the state of Ron could be so easy to get. Olivia had been a smart girl since childhood, but he didn't know if she could have foreseen her own death and planned it all in advance. The girl noticed that he was angry, but did not understand the reason, as he usually did not show his feelings. After she betrayed the whole clan, Olivia saw Lucas several times, but they tried to avoid each other. The Empress thought that he had completely erased her and his feelings for her from his memory. She suspected that he hated her, and now she was offering him the crown back. In that case, she would have to reveal her trump card. Lucas turned around and asked about why he would help her if she couldn't even keep her mistress safe. He then ordered her to go back, and then he could let her live. Olivia said that the Empress had told him before she died where Princess Serena, his younger sister, was. Lucas immediately stopped. Princess Serena, Lucas' younger sister, who had been stolen during the coup and held hostage. Gusto used the princess's safety to twist Lucas around as he pleased. After news of Her Majesty's pregnancy, Olivia began gathering information and learned of the princess' whereabouts. She knew of Gusto's weakness and kept that information safe to protect her child. Olivia didn't think she'd have to use it like this. Lucas turned around and asked about the truth, because if she was lying, she was unlikely to be able to keep her life. Olivia said that if he married her, she would show him where the princess was, and then added that she didn't want some grand celebration. She didn't want his love, but status. It would be beneficial to both of them, because then he would regain the throne and she could get her revenge. Lucas hesitated, and Olivia noticed. She didn't realize if he would agree to her proposal, but if he thought about it too long, it would be costly. Judging by the fact that no one knew about the death, let alone the funeral, it hadn't been that long since she had died. Olivia approached Lucas and told him that they should hurry, because in summer corpses decompose faster, and they couldn't hide the Empress' death for more than 3 days. Once it was announced, they wouldn't be able to get married because of the funeral, and if the princess was moved to another place, her information would be useless. Olivia asked about the hesitation. He asked her about whether she really thought it would be enough or what. Olivia thought about how she couldn't convince Lucas. But suddenly he picks her up and asks her if she can do more than that when they get married, because he can't find any other explanation for suddenly proposing marriage in the middle of the night unless it's love to the grave. Olivia replied that she hadn't thought of that, but would suffer, and then she hugged him, too, and asked about what he might want her to prove right then. Lucas ordered Winter to find some aristocrat to disguise the girl as her. Then he ordered, also find a priest to perform the ceremony, for he will marry her. Winter and Varen couldn't believe it. When Lucas left the girl's room, he asked if she had seen her last moments. She answered in the affirmative. He said that they would see each other at the wedding, but Varen asked him to wait and asked what was really going on. She couldn't believe it was over and fainted. Varen immediately appealed to her to wake up, because she can't just pass out like that, and then he asked her who she was after all. Already in Lucas's office, the doctor asked her if she had said so, and if her words could be trusted at all. Lucas replied that he didn't even know, because none of the spies he had sent to the palace had heard about the Empress' death. If it is true, it is possible that she is her shadow. It could be a trap to harm him, so we must be careful. However, only Lucas and Olivia knew that promise. If she wasn't her shadow, then how would she know that? Lucas went to Winter and asked him to find out about the girl. In Olivia's room, the servants asked how she was feeling. Then they added that they had prepared everything in a hurry, so they didn't know whether she would like it or not. But she was still beautiful. Olivia replied that she was fine. A servant appeared and announced that the priest had arrived. Already in a separate room, Lucas met the girl and told her that his favorite bride had finally arrived. He asked her if she was ready and invited her to come inside. The priest asked her to swear before the holy name of the goddess and asked Lucas first if he would take Briella Ford as his wife and love her for the rest of his life. To which Lucas replied that he did. Now Olivia's new name is Briella Ford. The priest turned to Briella and asked about whether she vows to take Lucas by Turfin as her husband for the rest of her life. A second wedding dress and a second wedding. This second life and all the opportunities that had miraculously come her way, there was no way she was going to miss out. Briella replied that she would swear on her life. The priest then asked them to kiss each other. Lucas turned to the girl and informed her that he was giving her one last chance, because it wasn't just a wedding, he was risking his life. He explained to her that if she did not intend to go to the end, it was better to run away right at that moment. because then it would be impossible to turn back time. Briella replied that he seemed to misunderstand something, because she was not going to run away. She had also put everything she had and kissed him. The priest announced that in Ron Brim's name, he was declaring them one. Lucas embraced the fact that they were finally husband and wife. Briella replied that she congratulated him on making him her true lord. Lucas asked the priest if it was over, just that she couldn't wait to have their wedding night. He picked her up in his arms and left. Already in the room, he informed her that she was pretty good at pretending. To which Briella replied that she had to pretend to be crazy about him if she was going to marry him with such an age difference. She almost didn't believe him either. Lucas said that the priest must have been fooled, and then he suggested that she put their wedding night on hold and get right to the point. He asked her about Serena's whereabouts, to which Briella replied that he needed to find a boy 14 years old named Noah who lived at the Capeman orphanage in Reneb. Lucas had scoured the entire empire looking for his sister, but he couldn't imagine her living pretending to be a boy. Lucas asked Winter about whether there were any knights who could leave at that very minute, to which sure, it would be dangerous to bring the princess to the capital. To which Briella informed that when the empress is dead, there is sure to be chaos in the official structure of the imperial palace. Winter asked about that, so conversely, it is the best time to act or not. It is at times like this that the emperor will be watching his highness even more, for there is a chance that he will use this situation to his advantage. Briella asked about whether they were aware that there was a festival coming up. There is a winery down by the Rhenau River in the lands of Reneva that produces the best wine in the empire. Lucas thought for a moment and then mentioned that there would probably be a lot of aristocrats everywhere during the festival. Briella asked what about taking the princess out and meeting her later, citing her desire to have fun at the festival. It would be safer that way, and then 2 knights should be secretly there so that Gusto would not suspect anything. But then Winter intervened and said that if they sent knights there, his safety would be jeopardized. Lucas said that the dangerous game had already started a long time ago, and then asked him why he didn't know why he had let himself be treated like that until now. Winter apologized and informed him that he would make all the arrangements. Suddenly there was a sound throughout the kingdom, that ringing of the bell that rang throughout the imperial palace. It proclaimed the death of the empress. Lucas turned around and realized that Olivia's death was true. He began to walk away saying that it was a shame that the first official event after the wedding was the empress' funeral. Briella replied that it didn't matter because on the contrary, the funeral could be a great opportunity. Lucas handed her the papers and she asked what it was about. To which came the reply that it was her role and therefore she should read it. Briella Ford is the illegitimate daughter of an aristocrat from the Northlands who may well have had savage blood running through her. A young girl of 20 who is very eager to get to the capital. Not a bad choice since she had been in the north before Lucas came to the capital. Briella asked about that aristocrat also being one of his men and where she was at that time. Lucas replied that she had died because she had been attacked by savages while she was in the north. The girl did not realize how many deaths Lucas had seen on his way. She hoped that with her help, his path would be lined with flowers. Varen reported that a messenger had arrived from the imperial palace. Lucas reported that it was even faster than he expected and asked Briella if she was ready, to which the girl said that yes, she had learned all the information. They are going to the palace. His Majesty personally sent a messenger. Lucas met him, where the messenger informed him that he needed to report to the palace as soon as possible. Lucas replied that it was fine and asked him to wait and told him that there was a new person in the Byturfin family, so he had to tell him that there would be 2 people from the Byturfins at the funeral. He handed him the letter and explained that he had gotten married. In the room, Briella was choosing a dress for the funeral, trying on one. She said that such a chaste dress would not fit. To which the servant said that it was the Empress' own funeral, especially as it was the first time she was going out in public. To which Briella replied that that was why she said it was not suitable. She asked about not having another dress. Mustard asked about what kind of dress she wanted, and if she was going to embarrass the Duke in front of all the aristocrats that would gather. The girl turned around and asked about how those knew where she was going for a funeral or a feast. The servant again pointed out that the Empress had passed away. This death could be a celebration for someone. Perhaps she would gain a status she could never have gotten. and then asked that they did not know how the empress was treated in the palace. She asked the servants about the fact that it wasn't like they would suggest that she cry in front of a joyous emperor. Briella informed that she is not going there to grieve over the death of the empress. She is going there to tell everyone about the arrival of a new member of the Biterfin family, and for that she naturally needs to attract everyone's attention. It doesn't matter what design, as long as it's black. The servants agreed. After a while, they arrived at the palace. Briella looked around and thought about being there again. But she didn't think that the day would come when she would be invited to her own funeral. It was ridiculous. Lucas turned his attention to her. The girl asked what was wrong, to which the Duke replied that she had a pretty bright one. She explained that he also knew that it was a holiday for the emperor, so he should dress accordingly. Lucas asked that judging by her appearance, it was not her first time in the imperial palace, to which the girl replied that most likely no one would recognize her there. The Duke thought about the fact that she looked to be in her early 20s, and she was not the least bit worried about going to the imperial palace itself. And this was not her first visit compared to her courage and willingness to do anything for the sake of the goal. His worries seemed pointless, just a shadow very much like his mistress. He only wondered one question: how had she lived all that time? They arrived at the location. Lucas gave her a hand from the carriage and told her that it was all for a purpose, but as long as he called her by the name of Biterfin, she should remember that she belonged with him. Briella only offered her hand in silence. The butler informed them that the emperor was already waiting for them. Lucas asked about what had happened, since he had not yet had time to say goodbye to the empress. The butler repeated that the emperor wanted to see them, but he did not know that the affairs of the living were more important than those of the dead. The Duke embraced his wife and proposed then to go. On the way, all the ladies noticed the Duke and the girl beside him. They didn't understand how they could marry with such an age difference. After all, he was a duke. The lady alone talked about how the Duke was not the type to pay attention to rumors. Standing with him, Briella realized that Lucas had to endure such insults all the time. If even the courtiers allow themselves so much, then what to speak of the emperor, and the Duke will have to endure many more insults. However, this was not the time to grit his teeth, but to lie low and wait for the right opportunity, the chance to grab him by the throat. The butler knocked and announced that the Duke had arrived, thickly sat on the throne. He greeted the Duke, to which the latter did the same, addressing him as the son of the empire. Gusto began to go to meet them with words that he was very disappointed in him, because he had sent him to save the people of the empire from the savages, and he was spinning his wheels. He was curious about the girl, since he decided to marry her. Then he asked her what kind of girl was his type. The emperor moved closer to Briella and asked about her being the new member of the Biterfin family. He ordered her to stop bowing and show her face. The girl raised her head proudly and greeted the emperor, introducing herself. She was honored to meet him and began to look proudly into his eyes. For Gusto, it was funny, because the girl is all trembling, and in his face to look, he thought about the fact that she is either stupid or inquisitive and somehow lucid to point out the status. The emperor covered his chuckle and said that he could not believe that she had captivated the Duke of Biterfin, who was indifferent to suitors, but now he understood. Gusto put his hands on her shoulders and asked about the fact that she was from the north so after all, and the color of her hair so unusual. Then he asked if she had the blood of a savage or not. Lucas couldn't take it anymore and grabbed his hands and told him that they had just recently ended the war with the savages. The emperor mockingly replied that they had just finished it, and the Duke's remarkable prank was proof of that, and he thought about the fact that Lucas was insolent for touching his woman. He decided that he would have to knock Lucas down again. The emperor kept asking that he didn't remember the princess while he was getting married, and that now the empress of the empire Ron didn't need her or what. It turns out that the Duke still forgot, and he, the son of the empire, was thinking about maybe visiting her after the funeral. He was a bastard, not an emperor. Briella noticed that he was purposely provoking Lucas. Apparently, Lucas's deed had caused a storm of indignation, so he was clinging to it. In that case, it was better not to fall for it and keep her emotions in check. She wouldn't give him a single reservation. The girl saw that Lucas was on edge and took his hand as a sign to calm down. He was a little annoyed at first at her asking him to calm down, and then he decided that calm was important. Lucas turned to the emperor and told him that he hoped that he would get the chance to see Serena again this time, and if he would allow it, he would like to accompany him. The emperor had not expected this, for Lucas should, as before, clench his fist impotently as he mocked him. He didn't realize the reason was the girl or not. The emperor ordered them to cease and desist, for it was time to bid farewell to the empress. But as soon as the Biterfans were on their way out, Gusto asked them if they knew how the empress died or not. Without their answer, he decided to tell his own stories of Olivia's death. The emperor spoke of how it appeared that his empress, the chaste and prudent mother of the empire, was having an affair on the side. Briella stood with her back to Gusto and listened to all that nonsense. Gusto went on to say that, whoever he was, with the birth of a child, the whole truth is revealed. That's why, in his opinion, maybe death befell the empress. And in his mind he said that this information was not clear to Briella, because the lover of the late empress could be her husband. Briella took Lucas by the hand and informed him that His Majesty had experienced a sorrowful event that defamed his authority. She turned to Gusto and conveyed her condolences. That's when they bowed out. The emperor was simply furious at this. The knight asked everyone to observe the line. Upon entering, everyone was offered a lily to honor the memory with an offering. Once inside, Briella noticed that the funeral was a bit too unorganized. Apparently they hadn't gone to much trouble. She wasn't surprised, though, a death that couldn't be glossed over. Briella overheard a lady talking about how the duke's marriage was already shocking, but how treasonous it was. The ladies were all discussing the duke and the already deceased empress. They were wondering what then of Countess Biterfen. Briella noticed such looks in her direction, thought that everywhere you look, and people are the same. From such thoughts, the girl also smiled. The lady noticed her smile, immediately went to her with the question that she was Countess Biterfen. In fact, she just wanted to make the countess feel bad. The lady asked why she did not put the flower, as Her Majesty the Empress was about to be consigned to the ground. They noticed that the countess was a northerner, so how could a savage know the etiquette of an imperial funeral? They really wanted Briella to be embarrassed. Briella approached her own past body. She had learned the farewell for the imperial family, and she would have to perform the ritual over her own body. Hold the stem with one hand and support it with the other. Then scatter the fragrance in 3 circular motions. The flower should be placed in the direction of the body, and in conclusion prayerfully fold hands, expressing sorrow. Goodbye, Olivia, and the life she lived for her family, and others also goodbye. Everyone present was shocked to see that the countess had performed the imperial ritual perfectly, without a single misstep. The knight turned to the people and informed them that the last time alone with the deceased would be spent by her family members, and everyone else should proceed to the cemetery. Briella and Lucas are going as well. Already walking towards the cemetery, Briella stopped abruptly. Lucas asked what was wrong. The countess replied that she had forgotten something in the funeral parlor and promised that she would be back soon. She was distracted by the court ladies, not saying a word to the child. If she left like that, she would be devoured by regret, because she finally had a chance to talk to him. She ran to the building, but as soon as she entered, she noticed that someone was upstairs. As soon as she started to climb the stairs, she already noticed Gusto and her father there. Her father was Marquis Rona, a man obsessed with the importance of family and duty. The girl was raised solely for the good of the family. She had been sold to Gusto at her father's will like a thing, and had been in the thorn forest of imperial life ever since. Her father also knew better than anyone what it was like for her there, except she hadn't heard a word of comfort from him. Her father bowed to Gusto, and Briella wondered what they were talking about. Gusto said that all the men had been taken away, so he could talk freely because it was just the 2 of them. Gusto explained that first of all, he was sorry for what had happened, because originally, as they had agreed, he had thought to deal with the Empress next year. It was because Eva was scandalized, and it was undesirable to be without her. However, given the pregnancy, it was only a matter of time before it happened. Briella could not believe that her father helped to kill her, his own daughter. She'd hoped so much that whatever he'd said was a lie. Except it wasn't. She didn't understand what it was all for. The father looked up and said that His Majesty had decided so after careful consideration, and he, in turn, always followed his decision. Gusto put his hand on his shoulder and said that he also had a good tongue. He would not mind drinking while listening to his toasts. A father had a hand in the death of his own daughter. She didn't realize that selling her for family gain wasn't enough or what. Though implicitly, Briella had expected something like this, for he had never cared for Olivia or a good empress. She had tried so hard to gain acceptance, but her whole body trembled at the feeling of betrayal. Briella trembled. She began to step back little by little, creating a rustle. This was noticed by Gusto and Father. Father said there must be a rat hiding. Gusto replied that they would look into it. The Emperor started to head in the direction where the Countess was hiding. She sat trembling, and her legs just stopped obeying. This way she would be exposed. Suddenly someone grabbed her by the arm and dragged her in his direction. Meanwhile, Gusto had already gotten to that spot, but lo and behold, there was no one there anymore. He wondered about the fact that there was no one there, but he definitely heard something, and there was indeed a rat running around. Meanwhile, Lucas covered the girl's mouth and asked her to be quiet. Lucas thought about how Gusto and Marquis Rona were having some strange conversation. He noticed how Isabella was trembling. Either way, they need to get out of there. He leaned over to her ear and whispered that they needed to get back or their absence would arouse suspicion. Lucas decided to carry her, but just so she wouldn't make a sound. When they were already out and on the street, Lucas asked what was wrong, because she suddenly snapped and ran away. Briella apologized and asked why he had followed her. Lucas replied that it was better for newlyweds not to walk apart. He saw for the first time the confusion of that exceptionally fearless woman. Gusto and the Marquis of Rona were there, and for good reason. Lucas reasoned that if she didn't want to tell, he wouldn't pry. On the stairs, they saw the Marquis of Rona coming up. They greeted each other, and the Countess introduced herself. The Marquis replied that it was not the right place for introductions, so he suggested that they continue as they should some other time. Briella turned to the Marquis and said that there had been bad rumors about Her Majesty's death, but she was glad to see him so cheerful. The Marquis said that he believed that his daughter's unworthy behavior had made the Duchess uncomfortable, so he apologized for such a thing and withdrew. Lucas didn't understand what was going on and doesn't even know what she saw there, but still, if she wants to cry, there's no need to keep the tears to herself. It was an appropriate day for them after all. Briella decided that she shouldn't hold it in and tears poured from her eyes. At the same time, the weather was crying too. Empress Olivia's funeral. Usually, when a member of the imperial family dies, the mourning period lasts about a week. But in Olivia's case, it was shortened to 3 days. That's how it ended. Briella doesn't know if it was the shock or the lack of rest after the rebirth, but when she returned from the funeral, she went to bed for 3 days, and the fever that had been rising like a heat wave on a summer day never let up. A few days later, an invitation came to Briella by Turfin. The Countess was a little surprised that it came at such a time, and with a seal of an acquaintance, it was from the imperial court. The sender was Eva Perina. Winter, noticing the Countess's reaction, said that she was hardly surprised that she had expected her to write a letter. The Countess replied that she had expected something like that. She had expected to hear the news that Eva had been proclaimed empress. It turns out there are more opponents than she thought. Eva still doesn't have a proper position, but only a noble castle in the name of Gusto. But she uses that seal. She is well settled even without a title. Winter turned to the lady and asked if she would like to prepare clothes and jewelry for the occasion, because as far as he knows, many married women prefer the outfits of Lady Blanc. Briella asked that Mrs. Blanc was now the most famous and promising designer. Winter said that it was true, as she herself knew, that although she had had things prepared for her at the estate, they were still not enough. The Countess reflected on the fact that she had essentially married the Duke with absolutely no dowry. It was ridiculous to even remember. The Countess turned to Winter and informed him that she needed to prepare for the future. Winter only smiled. She also asked if he could write a letter on her behalf. Briella knocked on Lucas' door to enter. Lucas informed her that he was just about to talk to her. Lucas asked about whether she was feeling better, because Varen was freaking out in there. It seemed that the one who hadn't been well for a few days was overworked, to which the Countess replied that she had already recovered and was really well now. and then asked if that was what he wanted to talk about or what. To which the Duke replied that someone had been assigned to Serena. Briella couldn't believe it, and Lucas asked about how she hadn't seen that coming. Briella replied that not at all, but that Her Majesty the Empress had figured out the princess's location shortly before she died. She wondered if Gusto had found out about it. She went on to say that if it had not been for carelessness on her part, they might have been able to find her sooner. The Countess thought about how she was the reason Lucas was screwed again. All the while, as soon as the conversation started, the girl unknowingly started biting her lips. Lucas rose from his seat and lightly touched her bitten lips. He explained that it wasn't her fault or her lips. The girl pleaded that he wasn't angry with her. Lucas replied that he didn't know what the Emperor was thinking, but she had made him aware of Serena's situation, and he was grateful. Briella thought about how thoughtful he was. Lucas put his hands on her shoulders and turned to her. He informed her that she probably knew that the Biterfans were called dogs on a leash, but with Briella it was different. Despite the burden of that last name, she has independently decided to stand side by side with him. So if she's already depressed, they're in trouble. The girl replied that she would keep that in mind. Lucas went on to say that they at any rate need to observe the situation and adjust plans if possible. That's what he wanted to say. He then added that her feelings for Olivia are genuine. He can see that. For him, it is true that her personality is still questionable, but she, as his wife, is allowed to take as much from the Duke's budget as she needs. He asked about whether that was what she had come to him for, or if perhaps they should spruce up the estate to match her mistress. Briella couldn't understand, beginning to trust her, and began to smile. She asked about whether it would have to be remodeled, since it would be back to the real house. The Countess moved a little closer to the Duke and began to roll up the sleeves on his shirt. She leaned his dolman against her forehead and informed him that it would not be 2 winters before His Majesty would ascend to his former position. Lucas asked if she really wanted to help him. Briella replied that she had wanted to help him from the beginning, but his faith in her made it clearer. The girl decided it was time to part with the shadow of Olivia buried beneath the castle. The Emperor with Eva and the Marquis of Rona had made their move, so it was up to her to make her move, at least little by little. Lucas thought about how strange it was. He had met this woman in the slums, but her every move exuded nobility, as if she had been given a decent upbringing, and her habits and smile constantly reminded him of someone, just like the one who turned her back on him. Lucas so wished he knew who she was. Soon, Mrs. Blanc's door. Mrs. Blanc asked who the letter was from. She was told it was from the Biterfan estate. Blanc thought about what to do, since the Duchess of Biterfan is in everyone's ear and her status is not something to ignore. She looked at the letter and kept wondering if she should assume that he was an ignorant hillbilly and how she should convey to her that she was a high-flying bird. Mistress tossed that letter on the table and decided that she would hold off on replying. Briella asked Winter what Mrs. Blanc had not yet written, to which he replied that unfortunately she had not. The Countess said that she seemed to be weighing the importance of the matter, so she would have to be the first to move the scales. Briella asked Winter to tell her that she would come to Mrs. Blanc's store. There she will show her which of the 2 of them is the weightier. Mrs. Blanc's assistant was in a great hurry to see her. The lady asked him what was the matter, why he was making so much noise. He replied that a new letter had arrived from the Biterfans' estate, saying that they were coming directly to them. Blanc could not believe it. She so did not want such a thing, for if rumors spread that the Duchess herself had come to the commoner's house, her reputation would suffer greatly. She had not expected a personal visit from her. She should have thought better of it before, not now. Mrs. Blanc informed the assistant to prepare to leave at once for the Biterfans' estate, but he replied that she was already on her way to them. A short time later, Briella arrived at Mrs. Blanc's door. The lady greeted her and told her that she was pleased to meet her, to which the Countess replied that it was finally happening. Blanc prepared in a hurry, but the tea party was organized. The Countess said that her letters had gone unanswered, and she had come in person out of concern for her health. On Mrs. Blanc reported that illness was forcing her to take a temporary rest. Briella thought of nothing else she could think of or how. She turned to Mistress and informed her to drop her little tricks and not to mess with her head. To which the mistress trembled and informed that the countess seemed to be a northerner and had a very sharp tongue. Briella heard such a thing, inquired as to whether the mistress thought she needed her ridiculous remark or what. Blanc thought about the fact that the same one had the blood of a savage flowing in her and was rumored to be a timid and weak woman. But in reality it was different. Her mistress asked why the countess had come to see her, for she had come so suddenly and was so rude, it made her sad. Briella replied that it is unlikely that the one who ignored the call of the Duchess has the right to say so, because there is only one reason why she needed Mrs. Blanc, because if she was selling simple clothes, there was no reason to come to her. Briella only speaks of the elegance of Mistress Blanc's clothes. Her outfits have the characteristic of making the person who wears them stand out, even beyond the seasonal fashions. Mrs. Blanc indicated that she was grateful that the Countess felt that way. Briella got up from the sofa and explained that the value of the outfits could not be estimated by money, so she thought that she did not need them, because Mrs. Blanc's clothes represented money, nobility, and influence. Madame noticed that the Countess was in high spirits. The Countess stopped and asked what about the nobility of the clothing maker herself. The mistress asked about the Countess, meaning her or what. Briella continued to ask what about those clients of the mistress who have influence. They didn't stop a simpleton from the Northlands from summoning the mistress to her. Mistress was rejected by the nobility, and that's why she started sewing at the age of 10. Everything she has, she got on her own, without anyone's help. Many aristocrats attend banquets in her clothes, but no one invited Mrs. Blanc to them, because she is a commoner, not their level. The Countess said that this is the status, no matter how many auctions she holds and no matter how high prices she sells her clothes, she is still not considered a noblewoman. She reached out to Mistress Blanc and informed her that she would give her influence. Madame laughed and asked about her offering her a title with her current position as a duke or what. To which Briella replied that no, dearie, she would just help to regain the position taken from the mistress. According to imperial information, Mistress Blanc's ancestral father was a pure nobleman, and he had to marry a woman of proper status. Madame Blanc's mother, a commoner, had no choice but to leave with her child. Mrs. Blanc concealed that she was the illegitimate daughter of a nobleman and apparently, like her mother, lived without status. The lady replied that she did not know how the Countess knew this, but that her place was only half hers. The Countess asked that she could not take it fully herself, but even if she could get it back soon, she should think about her son's future and the same kind of life, in which it is simply impossible to rise above, and that is not what the lady wants. Payback for other people's misfortune comes in the future. Briella asked about whether such a deal is not attractive. Mrs. Blanc asked about what she should do. Tea party day, Imperial Palace. Eva Perina and Countess Lorenz pointed out that Countess Byturfin has arrived. The weather is simply marvelous. As they approached the table, the butler announced that Countess Briella Byturfin had arrived. Eva began to chat with the others, asking about the harvest in the south being rich this year as well. To which Countess Lorenz replied that yes, and now the Imperial Palace would have quality wine. Briella noticed that they were pretending she wasn't there, which was childish. She decided to leave and headed back to the carriage. The butler asked where she was going. Briella replied that she thought she had not been invited and was going back, as there were no one there who could use the imperial seal. This made Eve very angry when she heard it. Meanwhile, at Byturfin Manor, Varen asked Lucas about what he was going to do with the new lady. Lucas asked about what about her. To which Varen replied that given their boundless love and their decision to marry in secret, the two of them didn't seem like a very special couple. He wondered how a man uninterested in women would behave in marriage, and Lucas was expectedly unchanged. To which the Duke replied that it wasn't true, and he simply couldn't afford to be interested in them, even if he wanted to. The doctor said that he should not refuse, and then asked him about the fact that he had to take responsibility for the lady as well. The doctor explained that she was in full view of many people, and a small slip was enough to arouse suspicion. Lucas turned around and thought about Varen's words. Meanwhile, at the tea party, Briella said that she needed to meet the owner of that seal, and since Her Majesty the Empress was not there, it was the Emperor who wrote it. Already unable to bear it, Eva abruptly jumped up from her seat. Seeing this reaction, the Countess thought that the fact that Eva was taking the seal of the imperial family would be a cause for ridicule among the nobles if they found out. Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard behind her back. It was Emperor Gusto, who apologized for gathering the guests and keeping them waiting. Eva immediately rushed to him. Briella couldn't believe that Gusto had come. The Countess greeted the Emperor. He asked her to straighten her back and explained that there was an urgent matter, so he asked Eva to prepare for her arrival. Briella replied that Eva hadn't been paying attention to her at all, so she thought she was in the wrong place. The Emperor immediately turned to Eva and gently asked if she was unwell or what, to which she agreed. The Countess was impressed that Gusto was capable of such affection. Already seated at the table, Gusto asked if everyone knew that Duke Byturfin had married or not, and then added that they could consider the meeting a small reception in honor of the Duchess. Briella replied that she didn't think he would personally organize it. The lady next to her replied that His Majesty had a boundless soul. Gusto said that it was his duty to take care of his subjects, but that he was a little discouraged by the secret wedding. The Emperor noticed how the Countess drank her tea. He thought only that it was very impressive. At the funeral he had been so out of sorts that he had not noticed, but now, Gusto turned to the Countess and asked about her familiarity with court etiquette. Since she had been brought from the north, it seemed. Briella replied that it was all thanks to the Duke, for he had taught her much. The Emperor asked if Duke Byturfin was the Duke, for he thought that he was only interested in stabbings, but he seemed to be very kind to his wife. The Countess explained that the Duke was very kind to her, kinder than anyone else in the world. Gusto thought of the Countess as being like the day moon. Eva decided to insert her nose into the conversation and said that Briella is a stranger and apparently doesn't really understand how the Duke is treated by His Majesty. Lawrence added that Duke Byturfin was a man of his word, and Eva asked if it was true that he sometimes gave off a cold stench. Countess Lawrence only giggled. The Countess, noticing such a reaction, thought about whose cow would moo. She didn't like to hear that, so she changed the subject, casually showing off her gloves. And it was noticed. Countess Lawrence and the lady next to her said that they were very stylish and beautiful gloves. It was the first time they had seen them. To which Briella said that they were the work of Mrs. Blanc and asked that they liked them too. Then she added that Mrs. Blanc had recently become her personal fashion designer. This is the first time Lawrence has heard of her. Eva replied that no noblewoman in the capital had ever had a personal fashion designer. Briella replied that she would be the first then. Eva went on to say that to have a fashion designer meant that she had a big appetite, even if it didn't look like it. The Countess explained that it's not a matter of greed, she just doesn't want to wear the clothes that others have. Attention to another person, as she learned, means showing respect, that is, it is closer to courtesy. As an example, Briella pointed out that if she said that she had tried very hard to meet each of them, they would be pleased and address Lady Eve specifically. When Eve heard such an address, she thought she was noble or something, because only one person addressed her in such a way, and that was Empress Olivia. Gusto thought that it was something new, because the Countess was used to talking to noble ladies on equal terms, but it was better not to interfere in women's quarrels. The Emperor apologized and said that he had to leave first, otherwise the counselor would come there and strangle him. Eva immediately asked if anyone would dare to strangle His Majesty and if he had not forgotten anything before leaving. Gusto embraced Eva and said that he never forgot. Briella realized how Gusto was without her, and for the other ladies the moment was very romantic. The Countess didn't hold out much hope, but it seemed that Olivia didn't exist at all. The ladies noticed Duke Byturfin nearby. Lucas stepped closer and greeted the Emperor. Gusto asked about what prompted the Duke's visit, hardly a desire to have a cup of tea with the ladies. To which the Duke replied that he had only come to see his wife, for he was worried that the imperial palace was not quite familiar to her. The Emperor asked about what became of love above even the Emperor or what. Lucas asked about the fact that he felt that way. Lucas put his hands on Briella's waist and asked Gusto if it was jealousy. That's all, dear friends. Write your opinion about this story in the comments. Is it worth doing a second part?